नमो अरिहंताणम, नमो सिद्धाणम, नमो आयरियाणम, नमो वज्जायाणम, नमो लोये सव्व साहूणम, एसो पंच नमुकारो सव्व पावकपणासनो मंगलाणम च सव्वेसिम पढ़मं हवै मंगलम। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमः शिवाय। जय सच्चिदानंद। Very humbly, Jai Sachidanand to one and all. Our YouTube viewers, welcome. It's my privilege to introduce today's speaker, Chris Mueller from Germany. Chris Mueller is working as an agile coach at the largest German insurance company. He is a breathwork teacher and leadership coach. Apart from spiritual science of Dada Bhagwaqn, his interests and hobbies are new and innovative work to love nature and to seek refuge in the beauty of nature. Mr. Mueller had his education in Germany and China. He holds honors degree in international management. Further, he is knowledgeable in multiple areas and disciplines. He is dedicated to helping individuals, teams, and organizations for their improvement. He is also the editor of a very reputed book, Holistic Food Science, which is now available on Amazon.com and received with pleasure by readers worldwide. Friends, Chris Mueller got fluency in German, English, and Chinese language. His hobbies further, he loves to travel. Bitcoin is also his interest, and Qigong, that is Chinese practice of meditation also, he is proficient in. So cordial welcome to Chris Mueller. Chris, we are very eager to listen to you. So over to you now. Thank you very much. And let me add something I can't control. Chris has been the talk of the entire India for his marriage, which took place in Gujarat. It was reported by the Times of India as the marriage was conducted with entirely Sanatan and Hindu rituals. We are very happy that Mrs. Chris has also with us. Julia, cordial welcome to you. Thank you very much for joining. We really salute both of you. Dada has really all the blessings for you. Thank you very much. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you so much, Chandrakant Pai, for this warm introduction. I hope I can live up to all the things you just showered me with. So thank you very much for this. It's really an honor to be here today. I'm very grateful that I'm allowed to present the topic food science. I pray to Dada that he will give me the strength to just be instrumental and to just, tell a little bit about my own experiences and how I came to realize food science in many different ways, and also what his teachings are. So let us get started with the first slide. Oh, that was a bit too much. So the importance of food and diet. And I have these two little pictures for you. You are what you eat, which basically is a saying that pretty much conveys the importance of food science, right? It's you are what you eat. On the right, you see another picture where it says every day or every 35 days, your skin replaces itself. Yeah, your liver in about a month, and your body makes new cells from the food you eat. So what you eat literally becomes you. And that's just the body aspect of it. For me, food is so much more than that, than just filling one's plain belly, you know. And here are a few things I just collected in a brainstorm session. What food is outside of just filling one's belly. It is a quality of life. It is naturalness. It's about health and disease, about your physical strength, about beauty. It's about beliefs and ideologies, about culture and tradition. There's also a lot about social gatherings, so people come together in a family around the dinner or lunch table. It's about diets, it's about the taste, sensual cravings, affordability plays a role, even expression in a sense of luxurious food or very cheap food, the kind of notion you convey with just eating a certain type of food. And then in the end, there's also a subtle science of food and maybe even violence that we touch upon a bit later. So as you can see, food touches so many different areas in our lives. And that's why it's virtually impossible to just give you a broad, full scope of the topic of food in just 75 minutes. So what we're doing is we have a beautiful book that is basically compiled the science of Dada Bhagwaqn. And my talk is pretty much based on that today. And I will not touch upon all the book, all the contents, but it's more to be understood as an introduction to this book. And maybe that is also nice for you for further reference. If you have, or if you want a deeper understanding, you can always get this beautiful little booklet and just read more in depth about it. And don't get fooled, my name is very predominantly on the front page, but I was just the editor. Like, to be very frank, the biggest contribution is because of Lalakaka and ScienceBy, who did a very, very amazing job in compiling all these talks and translating all these talks of Dada Bhagwaqn. All right, I would like to start pretty much with this question: how important is food in one's life? We already learned now that it touches so many vast topics of life and living. But the question remains, how much energy and time should be spent? Food matters personally. And I really like this little simile here of those cars and fueling, because Dada Bhagwaqn, I think, once said that it's a little bit like fueling the car. Food is like the fuel you put in the car. And of course, you take a lot of care that you put in the right fuel because you want to drive with it. But at the same time, you also don't overly stress about fuel or make it so much of a thing in your life that there is no room for anything else. Because what would happen then is that you may become that blue car in the top left corner that is just standing there with the engine on, consuming the fuel all the time without going anywhere. And that's not what the goal in this life is about, according to Dada Bhagwaqn. It's about driving. So food is basically a fuel that helps us to achieve our bigger goals in life. It's a byproduct or a side product, but not the main product. All right, then we have a look at the 6 constituents of the body. Dada Bhagwaqn always said that there is like 6 constituents that basically comprise the living human body of every living being. And those six constituents are space, earth, water, wind, light, and subtle fire. And this is quite interesting because when the body of every living being is comprised of these elements, then the second thing that I'm going to show you now is becoming very important. And that is that apart from the 6 basic elemental substances, there are also 6 different tastes, according to Dada Bhagwaqn. And we have here a few examples of those examples that represent those kind of tastes. So for example, earth element has a lot of food grains have a lot of earth elements in them. Then sugar is the wind element, for example. Spices have subtle fire element. Light element has a lot, like sunlight, and also the calories in food are pretty much a representative of the light element in one's body. And to make this even more precise, this shows it maybe even better. This is how the 6 tastes and the 6 constituents of the body basically work together, right? We need all the foods that have a balance of all the 6 tastes because they basically are responsible for those 6 building blocks in our bodies. So, for example, when we eat salty taste food, that is basically the food with the earth element. And we eat sour food that gives the aqua, the water element, and so on and so forth. And this is so important because Dada Bhagwaqn said a deficiency in one of those 6 tastes then obviously leads to a deficiency in one of the 6 constituents of the body, and that has an impact on our overall health. So let's dive a little bit deeper into that. Because Dada Bhagwaqn always stressed that it's so important to maintain a good balance of all the 6 tastes, right? It's like crucial importance for our health, and to have that in our daily meal. And he even goes so far that he says that a group of people, when they say, oh, this meal, for example, the dal here in this example, is very delicious, then we can know that it is well balanced with all the 6 tastes. Because we just have sort of like an innate check for if a meal is well balanced. And the thing is, those 6 tastes, they do not come up on their own. One really needs to season, to spice up the food. Just simply adding some spices or combining them in a certain way is not working. So in India, for example, it's a lot about seasoning the food, sauteing it with spices and condiments like mustard seeds, fenugreek seeds, chilies, asafoetida, and so on and so forth. So the traditional kitchen, and as you can see, almost becomes a sort of pharmacy. And this is very beautiful because that is not only a thing in India. All over the world, we have cultures that have their own time-tested traditional meals. I know it, for example, from Ayurveda. There is the concept of when something is tridosha, which means it has a balance of many of the tastes and balances all the doshas in people. Then they also found that many of the traditional kind of meals in other cultures, they also have these tridoshic qualities. So I even heard once, not sure if this information is entirely correct, that even a thing like a pizza in its original way, like with mozzarella, basil, and the dough, has this tridoshic kind of combination, which is, of course, a staple food in Italy. So yeah, we really have traditional food, the preparation as a sort of pharmacy that helps us achieve wholesome food and a healthy diet. So what is wholesome, balanced food, right? It is really the balance of all those 6 tastes. And why this is important is, again, because a lack of that leads to that we get a deficiency in our body. And to have a look at that, I also tried to display that a little bit graphically or visually. Here in this example, the person didn't consume maybe enough bitter tastes, right? So this is marked through that red cross here in the example. And then, of course, if we don't have the bitter taste in our diet, then we're missing here the whole white spot in this pie chart, which is basically the light element. And that then leads to further health problems in the long run, right? So that's why Dadaji gave examples like if we don't take bitter foods, which most people don't take, or a lot of people don't take, let's say, then within 6 to 8 months, we can really seriously get ill and maybe needs to supplement quinine pills or something like that. In India, I heard that people like a lot of pungent and sweet foods, but not so much astringent foods, for example. So every culture maybe has their predominance also in what is lacking. And so it's very important to take good care of having a balance of all the 6 tastes. So this is a part that is, to me, very interesting because what is wholesome food that fits for you can be totally different to what is wholesome food that fits for someone else. And it took me a long time in my own understanding to kind of get there. So what Dada Bhagwaqn beautifully said is that every community really has their own customs as to what is wholesome, right? They really have their own physical constitution. And within every community, within every clan, there is a different respective need of what is actually truly wholesome. So what can be regarded wholesome in one culture doesn't mean that it's wholesome in another culture. So to give an example, Dadaji also made this example of the red chilies, how important they are in the diet because they increase subtle inner understanding and help a lot to elevate people spiritually. But at the same time, he also says that for Western people, they cannot have that very well because for them, digesting red chilies is just very, very difficult. And I want to touch a little bit upon that because for me, this was always very, very, very nice to, to understand that better. And I have a few examples of that. So the first one is the story of, I hope I pronounce his name correctly, Vilhjalmur Stefansson. He was a Canadian Arctic explorer, and he wrote a book, My Life with the Eskimos, in 1913, so a long time ago. And the story basically goes that while he was exploring the Arctic, he eventually got stuck there. Again, it was 1913, without internet, without any contact to Western civilization. And he ended up living with the Inuit people, the Eskimos, for, I think, more than 8 years. And in those 8 years, he really got very accustomed to the diet, to their habits. He, I think, even married a Inuit woman, and like really got very much into their culture and traditions. And after 8 years, he got found or got back into Western civilization, and he went to doctors because he was severely malnourished. He showed in his blood works a lot of lacks of vitamins and essential minerals. And when you see this landscape, right, of where the Inuit people live in the Arctic, then you can also see that there's not much vegetation, there's not much plants, not much fruits growing at all. So the Inuit people, they really have adapted to this. And for 8 years he tried and he could not manage to kind of fit into their lifestyle. And the interesting part is that then some researchers went to those Inuit people he lived with, and they ran some blood work checks also with those Inuit people that were born there and they're natives. And they found out that they don't lack any kind of nutrients and vitamins, which I found is very interesting. And I personally made a very similar experience because I spent some time in the African savannah in Kenya with the Maasai tribe. I lived with them. You can also see that here in their manyetas in the top left corner there, those really old huts, you know, where they lived. And I really like immersed myself in their culture, lived with them. And the interesting part is that the Maasai diet consists basically mainly of only 3 things. And those 3 things are meat, milk, and blood. So again, a very specific, kind of very special diet. And yet I was always intrigued because the Maasai people is a warrior tribe. You know, they go out in the savannah, they're hunting, and the men are very tall, they're very strong, they're very powerful. And yet they were not showing any significant signs of any malnutrition or any deficiencies, you know, and that just with a diet of milk, blood, and meat. And I even stumbled upon that another time when I had some experiences in Ayurveda myself. I did some panchakarma and always had some of my own health-related digestion issues, and I tried to really heal them. And even though Ayurveda is very beautiful and it taught me a lot, I have to say it also didn't fully work out for me. Even when I come back home to Germany, oh, sorry, that was a bit too far. I bought myself even an idli cooker, and for the first few months, I would say, I would even trying to follow and do idlis at home, you know, and things like that. But the truth is, my health only really got better when I came back to what is traditional in a little bit my own culture, and I came a little bit back to what is locally available, and that was actually when my digestion really improved. And with the Ayurveda, for example, I often had the feeling that all those herbs, even though they're probably very healing, they're almost sometimes even a bit too much for my system, because I'm not grown up with eating so many different spices and herbs like many of us are here in India, right? So this was for me very interesting, that it really depends on also where you are grown up and what is your predominant culture, the community and the clan you were brought up as to say what is wholesome and beneficial food for you. Dada Bhagwaqn also always said that how do we create the habit of eating wholesome food is not so easy. It doesn't come so easily and so simply. But to have the ability, one may aim to achieve it by the following aspiration. And many of you may know that is part of our 9 diamonds we have, the 9 aphorisms. And one of it reads out, "O pure consciousness within me, may you bless me such an infinite inner strength to control my excessive temptation towards any particular taste of food. Give me the strength to eat wholesome food, having a balance of all the tastes." And again, in this beautiful little sentence, this beautiful little prayer, it again shows the importance of praying to eat healthy, wholesome food and having this balance of all the 6 tastes. So it's kind of that importance. And another part that is in this aphorism is that it's about controlling our excessive temptation towards particular tastes of food. And I want to have a look at you a little bit closer on the next slides, what is maybe meant with that. So here we have a slide where it's about natural food versus processed food. And Dadaji always recommended to eat light, easily digestible food, to avoid heavy foods that, increase the dullness, maybe even sensual excitement. Because he said again that all the health-related issues come up because of one's food. However, in present times, people have often overlooked those time-tested traditions, right? Even the traditional kitchen in many parts of the world, I see it in Germany, so much of this knowledge and wisdom has just got lost. Many of my friends and people in my generation, they don't even cook themselves anymore. And instead, people have become quite unnatural and using a lot of processed unnatural food. And Dadaji said to that unnatural items serve no purpose other than imaginary taste. It's unhelpful to the body anyway. He also said people should eat without such unnecessary processing. Or another quote from him is, deep fried food items should be avoided as long as possible because they're just for taste and they adversely affect the functioning of the body systems. And he always preached that all we need, and it sounds so simple, is normality in food habits, right? That the functioning of the body is so normal. It just requires simple food. It doesn't ask usually for special varieties of cake or dessert or all those cravings. And that then food can even be is easily available in a natural course with also normal efforts. But the challenge for many of us is, and he had a beautiful name for that, is unnecessary necessities, right? People have all sorts of cravings for special flavors or desserts, right? And that is what he said, quite unnaturalistic and harmful. And he again explained it in a very simple way that, if you just become unnatural and you breach the laws of nature, then you cross the normality, then you will get sick sooner or later, or at least nature will respond in its own way to those kind of mistakes. And I personally really think that this is sometimes so beautiful because it just brings down something that is so vast and elaborate in such a simple way. The normal life and living is the liberated life and living. That's one of his other quotes that I really like. And so he says, in eating, in drinking, in sleeping, in all the activities, if we follow normality, then we are fine. And if we don't, then the body starts to suffer as we get out of alignment. Pains are coming as warning signals, and ultimately, a disease will manifest within us. And I want to have a look at you now with some examples of maybe also our current state in the world of processing food, unnatural food, because Dadaji said all those things during his times, and that's at least 30 years ago. So that is to say, in 30 years, a lot of things happened. And I think in the term of alienation from nature and unnaturalness, things have even taken a turn for at least getting a little bit more in that direction. And we have a look at that now by some pictures. So here's a quote: about 80% of the foods on our supermarket shelves today, they didn't exist 100 years ago, right? Or another one here on the right is saying, if food products were labeled honestly. So then we had maybe the acrylamide chips or the zero nutrition puffs or the obesity, diabetes drink and things like that. And this picture is one that I really like because it shows that quite accurately. On the left, we have a watermelon, and what happens to it after 80 days, it just decomposes, it just decays. That's how nature works, right? It's like building and then dying again or shrinking. Quran and Galan, right? This normal process. And below that, we have a McDonald's hamburger with fries on day 1 and on day 180. And these are real pictures. And basically on day 180, the food didn't change at all. It looks still the same, which shows what happens when we chemically and when we just process foods and alter the naturalness of it. On the right side, there's another beautiful example of that. We have, again, industrialized, produced plant fats, margarine, and reduced fat margarine even. And then we have natural butter. And you can see where the ants, the animals, are clustering around, what they pick. And this is interesting because Dadaji also used to say in one of his quotes that we should observe the animals and how natural they still are in their eating habits. So this is maybe a beautiful picture in that regard. Then I have a comic for you, and I would like maybe someone to read what the mother says in this kind of little cartoon. So maybe someone of you could read that real quick for me.
I will volunteer, do my best.
Thank you.
Okay. Children, today I will show you something you may have never seen before. It's called real food, and it's the kind of thing that our ancestors once ate. It doesn't come from packages or fast food restaurants.
Thank you so much, Eleven. Yeah, and then the children reply, wow, that's weird, creepy. You actually expect us to eat something like that? Or, hey, how did these things get dirt on them? And this is just a little like kind of funny cartoon, but it pretty much displays how life, maybe even right now, is already to some degrees. And I have one more example of that from our German culture. And in Germany, we have a very famous chocolate brand. And the chocolate brand is called Milka. And Milka is very famous for their purple branding. So as you can see, the cow there's like a purple cow in them. And we say that some German city children who grew up not in nature, but in the cities, they believe that this is how a cow looks like in our modern world, right? So that cows are purple, basically. And one more quote I have for you. The key to eating healthy: avoid any food that has a TV commercial. Or the problem is we are not eating food anymore, we're eating food-like products. So this is just for you some examples of where we're probably at in this unnaturalness of food, and also how beautifully Dada Bhagwaqn has prescribed the steps to come back to some form of that naturalness. All right. He also said that everyone gets food befitting one's natural temperament. And this is beautiful because it already maybe touches upon the more subtler science of food. We touch upon that a little bit later in time. But here it quite fits well because Dadaji explains that we get everything that our Prakriti, our own kind of body composition that it likes and needs within its normal course. That is to say, without our inner passions of greed, deceit, pride, cravings, and only those are basically creating a steer in nature's supply chain. So we should just not think of any food, but just accept the food that we have in front of us and cherish what we have in front of us. Be grateful for it, accept it. We had a lecture on acceptance the other day, and just relish what has come to you naturally. And that also touches a little bit upon eating mindfully. Dadaji really has emphasized the crucial importance of eating mindful, right? He always said that the chit, the reflective consciousness, should always be very present when you're eating. And I remember before getting to know about this, and I'm sure I'm not alone, I was eating like many people eat nowadays. And that is to say, I would eat in front of the TV, in front of watching a movie, or scrolling on my phone. And Dada really emphasized that if you have time, really make it a focus to really focus your consciousness, your chit on eating and chew thoroughly, right? Because he really said, like, if we don't do that, and there is this example of the rich businessman who is so much in his company all the time with his chit, that while he's eating and he gets the most luxurious meals because he's very rich, he's not even enjoying the taste of it because his mind is constantly basically in his business. And he says when we are so inattentive, then it's really bad for our health. It can even lead to cardiac arrest and other disorders in the long run. And on top of that, you also don't really enjoy the meal. There's another saying that I like, that is, the hungry ones have the best taste. So if you're really like kind of focused on and being present on it because you cherish the food in front of you, then that is very beautiful. And he also emphasized on chewing very thoroughly because he said we have teeth in our mouth, so we need to use them well also. And if we don't use them, that's our own mistake. Dadaji also emphasized that it's very beneficial, and that maybe also is a little bit together with eating mindfully, that we should just not overindulge or eat too much so that we're like kind of need to rest for 4 hours to digest all the food. And he again had an approach, or taught an approach, that is very simple and straightforward. He just said, imagine you have 4 parts in your belly. So just reserve 2 parts of that 4 parts for food, 1 part for water, and leave 1 for space or for air to digest. Very simple, very straightforward, but very easy to maybe memorize. And he said that, yeah, this is very beneficial. If you just partially fill the stomach, then you can be sharp, you can be attentive, you can be focused. But if you overindulge, then it's also a sort of kind of borrowed happiness. It has to be repaid later. And then a disease is in a way just a repayment of all those borrowed sensual pleasures that we had in our lives. All right. Now we come to a topic that is very dear to my heart, because this lifted a lot of confusion for myself. Because I basically all my life had this question, yes, a plant and an animal, they're both somehow alive, right? How can we eat one but not the other? And this question only basically when I got to know Dadaji's food science, this kind of confusion in me got lifted, because there were many meat eaters even who would confront me with that, how can you eat plants? They're also alive. I'm also eating just alive things. So we will hopefully understand that in quite a bit, because Dadaji has nicely explained the kind of food pyramid, the kind of categories of food that is advisable if we want to elevate ourselves spiritually. And then we also touch upon some special forms in this, which is, for example, milk and also eggs, because that would even confuse me even more, right? Like, is an egg alive or not? And what about milk? What is milk? Yeah. So Dadaji says here, whatever is edible has life in it, and we cannot consume inert matter. So that means even the animals do not eat lifeless things. This is just plainly because the soul resides in every living being. And so this is very interesting because it means that anything we eat is sort of like a subtle form of violence, right? Because we kind of hurt a living being through eating it or consuming it. But however, we can still try to incur the liability that is minimal. And for that, Dadaji explained nicely that there are different categories of food. So we have this food pyramid, basically, and it's beautiful because it's, again, very simple. We have on one side the perception of pain, and on the other side, the increase of senses, right? And it's like this opposite pyramid, and on the lowest form, we have one sense living beings. And we have 2 sense living beings, 3 sense living beings, and so on and so forth. And he says that the perception of pain just really relates with the amount of senses a living being has developed. So it is available, it is advisable to really exercise discretion in the choice of food, to really, for our own well-being, for our own not wanting this boomeranging effect of karma to come back to us, to have just the least possible suffering returning to one. And from this consideration, the human flesh and the animal flesh is the worst because it has 5 sense perceptions, right? Then comes, the animal meat I already had. And even in this category, he says it's better to consume the flesh of the species whose population increases rapidly, such as chicken, fish, or duck, as opposed to eating beef and the meat of such animals whose population does not increase rapidly. So to make this a little bit more clear, I have a little picture of the different examples of the sense developments in living beings. So we have on the left top 1 sense living beings, which are, for example, the plants, the water, food grains, right? And we have 2 sense living animals like worms, shells, 3 sense living animals like ants and bugs. These are just examples, right? It's not a full comprehensive list. And then we have 4 sensed living animals like spiders and bees, and also 5 sensed living animals, of course, like humans predominantly, but also a lot of the animals. And so Dadaji really advised to eat the 1 sense living animals because this is the minimum liability that we create with this. Because we simply cannot live without having food, right? So like we learned, any kind of consuming food is a type of violence because we destroy any living being for food. However, we can exercise minimum violence. And the interesting part is here that he says that, however, it's not feasible to rise beyond this in the practice of subtle nonviolence and compassionate living. So, because there are some approaches in life and living that even try to go beyond this, kind of like not to even harm 1 sensed living beings. And Dadaji has nicely explained that actually humans, we are human beings because we have so much merit karma to one's credit. And when we basically eat those single sense living entities, such as grains, fruits, or vegetables, a portion of our credit basically goes away as a share to those entities consumed by us for their further evolution after that life. And so, on the other hand, a human being who is then sustained by that food of that 1 sense living being could also earn maybe more merit karmas because it just got the right fuel, right, to lead a virtuous life. So to give an example, he explained it like this. If we're having a single sense living entity in one's food, and we are performing then a good deed, and let's say we earn 50 merit points, right, to just make it very simple, then maybe 10 points of that would get transferred to the credit of that entity that we just consumed. So we are left as a human with 40 points, and the entity consumed is getting 10 points of merit karma. And from that, of course, that single sensed living being can elevate or could elevate to a two-sensed living being, which, for example, has then touch and taste and continue basically on their further evolution path. So it is basically a mutually benefiting chain of evolution. And this for me was very kind of mind-blowing to hear this, that yeah, in this, if we look at it like this, then it makes totally sense. And he just always said that such science is not properly understood by people. It was not by me. Maybe for some of you also, it was not properly understood. We can discuss that further in our discussion afterwards. I would love to hear some of your ideas on that. Okay, and again, he said it's not feasible to rise beyond this in the practice of subtle nonviolence and compassionate living. And because we're just talking about that, I just put in one more time this slide from the beginning, because again, we should have normality, and food is not the main product. It's a byproduct for us to drive, to fulfill our real goals in life, and to sustain us, but it should not become such a big part in our life that everything is just about food. And we're like the blue car that is just standing, consuming fuel, and is not moving. Because then what would happen? People would come to us and scold us, right? Why are you parking your car here and not kind of driving somewhere, right? You're kind of putting all your exhaust fumes in nature. So a little bit as an analogy, the same applies for our lives. All right, so Dadaji also said that the descriptions of those categories that we just went through are just there for our own knowledge. They're not so much there for the purpose of our enforcement, right? So what we can remember maybe is that a living being that doesn't get frightened or scared, that can be taken as food. So all these single sense living entities such as vegetables, grains, they're in a latent state, and that's why they don't feel pain. And that's why they're the best choice to be consumed as our food. And all other living entities that have more than one sense, such as birds, animals, they get frightened when you touch them. So we should refrain from killing them. And I had actually this morning, when I was preparing this talk a little bit, a beautiful example of this. There was a spider crawling over my my prayer booklet, and I tried to catch it, to rescue it and bring it outside. And while I put a glass on top of it, it became aware that I'm trying to kind of chase it, and it got scared. It tried to escape and run away, right? So this is beautiful thing to witness, that even already three sense living entities, they try to escape from us, and we can just see and observe that in daily living. And here's another quote that I like a lot, which is from Sadhguru, actually. He said, food is not a morality. Food is a question of well-being. And this brings me to some of those exceptional cases I was mentioning earlier. So we also have eggs. What about eggs? And I found this picture here, and I really like it because it conveys it quite much what Dada Bhagwaqn said about this. He said that people argue that there are eggs which are lifeless. But again, remember, he said that it is impossible to eat anything that is non-living, right? Because then it would be simply inedible. We cannot eat anything that is inanimate. So an egg is also alive. However, an egg is not running away, right? So technically, this sounds like, okay, it's not frightened. However, the life that is contained within the egg is just an dormant state of five sense lying unconsciousness, like a human embryo, because a chicken is a five sense living being. So whether or not it hatches or not into a chicken, he says, is a different matter. And I found another very, very beautiful picture that conveys that. Here is a picture of the human fetus and the bird fetus at 4 or 5 weeks. And you can really see it's almost like eerily strong, the kind of resemblance of the fetuses in the bird and respectively in the human. So they are pretty much in the same state. So Dada Bhagwaqn said it's better that we do not harm the eggs. I'm actually looking very much forward also to the final parts of my talk, because I also have some evidence that is backing this, which is coming from a kind of direction that has nothing to do with Dada Bhagwaqn. So it's nice that we can have a look that even some science is backing this up. Another exceptional case we had is milk, right? Dadaji explained that you can consume milk and milk products with no hesitations. There are no restrictions. And then a fellow asked him, but nature had intended the milk for the calves and not for us. Is it true? And this is a very common argument many people bring. And Dadaji said that this is not true, because only the calves of the white cows and the white buffaloes drink all the mother's milk. When you raise a cow yourself and it has a calf, then you can really benefit from that excess milk that the calf is not needing. And he said that this is a practice that has been going on from time immemorial, right? Because if you feed a cow well, it can produce up to 15 liters of milk a day, which is more than the normal amount of milk you would. So you would not be needing to deprive the calf of its share or letting it go hungry. And I brought you another picture into that, which is milk and milk replacements. Because again, I found this quite interesting. We were talking earlier about the unnaturalness, the alienation from nature. And I found this interesting because here we have comparison of raw milk and a plant-based milk. And on the left, the raw milk from the cow, it just has one ingredient. It's just 100% dairy. It's that simple almost, right? Of course, maybe milk is also comprised of water in it and some minerals, also calcium and so on. But in a way, it's just one ingredient. And the ingredients of a plant-based milk, there are many things in that. And they're all artificially added. We often have acidity regulators. We have industrial minerals that are added. We have synthetic vitamins that are added. And there are even many studies recently carried out that show that synthetic vitamins cannot even be properly absorbed by the body. So just as an addition to that. Okay, now that we have a little bit figured out the food pyramid, and maybe that also gives some advice on the kind of violence it can cause or what is involved, we can have a look at the spiritual science of food. That was always, for me, one of the most important aspects. Because I always asked myself, yeah, food is important, of course, for my body, but what about the inner development? What about my spiritual growth and progress? And Dadaji explained that some foods are really helping, other foods are like poison-like and disturbing, and it really depends, so to say, on kind of like what is good for us. And what you eat, so is your mind and the thought process. And we have to have a look at that in a little bit more depth now, and we will, because he even goes so far as to say that as is one's food, so is one's mind. As is one's water, so is one's speech. So it really has a very, very deep effect on our mind, on our speech, and also on our thought-building processes. And a seeker asked Dadaji here, how much can the purity of food and water help one to cleanse and improve one's thought process? And Dadaji said that the purity in food and water really helps to improve that. So when you eat in outside restaurants, for example, the meals that are prepared by the cook, the thought process of this cook, his atoms in the aura, they leave an effect on the food that you're eating, and you get influenced by that. So he often said that eating outside food leaves an impact like having a bad company. And he even gave this example that he was once, I think, in a confectionery and was preparing sweets. A cook was preparing sweets with his nails full of dirt, and it was very unhygienic, and his sweat was like getting mixed into the sweet, and he was asking, how can we consume such outside food, right? So he always said, avoid taking outside food. And this again was something very, very new to me, something I also in the beginning didn't like much to hear, to be frank, because I used to live for many years in places like Vietnam and was traveling a lot. And when in places, even ordering or taking out food is cheaper than cooking yourself, then of course, the choice is not so hard as to what you're doing. And so he says, yeah, people habitually eat at restaurants, and maybe this after 30 years, it's, I guess, even much more nowadays. And when we eat outside food, however, then those molecules of that prepared food, they can get accumulated in our bodies, and over a period of time, they putrefy, and the results are dysentery or stomach pain. And I experienced that myself. I believe that is a huge cause why I had digestive issues for so many years in my life. And he says then, if you're too hungry, then have some boiled milk, fruits, roasted beans, or biscuit, but avoid taking outside cooked eatables as much as possible. And again, I think this goes together with another maxim that he said that we heard many times before, which is adjust everywhere. So of course, we should also not be super stern, right? Everything within normality. And of course, if there is an event where we are invited, then maybe it's more important to deal with those kind of files we have. Okay, here is one more picture, the food effects on the aura, because again, everything that is cooked by the cook has a corresponding effect on the body and mind. But this can go in either direction. It can go in maybe outside takeaway restaurants or dining in. It can go in a negatively affect your aura, but it also can affect your aura in a beautiful way. And such is the case in holy places or ashrams or where spiritual gatherings are done. And he basically says that food in spiritual holy places is not just to satisfy one's hungers or the taste buds, right? It's really for the purpose of elevating ourselves spiritually, purifying our body and mind through that food. That's why those intentions then, they also come through in the food we eat. And now I'm very happy actually to go a little bit into something that I was mentioning in the very beginning, which is the evidence that is not coming from Dada Bhagwaqn himself, but from a sort of science. And we have a look here, because I'm talking about the Maharishi Adhyatma Vishwaraya University of Spirituality. Not sure if I pronounced that correctly, but one can also say in short, the University of Spirituality under His Holiness Dr. Jayant Attawale. And they're in Goa, located. They have their center and ashram there. And what I'm going to share with you now are basically visuals that are based on research they have done there on how our diets affect our aura. And this is very interesting because each and every one of those slides is basically backing up what Dada Bhagwaqn has proclaimed. So we have a look at that. So as I said before, food can either impact our aura in a positive or negative way. And they say even that it has one of the fastest effects on our aura because we ingest it directly into our system. And at the Spiritual University, they are using universal aura scanners to basically get an idea of what is happening. And those universal aura scanners are developed by Dr. Manimurthy, who was a former nuclear scientist. And they really are used to measure the subtle energy, positive and the negativity, and the aura around any object, be it living or non-living. And over the course of the last 7 years, they did some amazing testing and studies, and they scanned more than 12,000 objects, and they found quite interesting findings. And I want to share some of them with you now. So the first is, this is the aura of non-vegetarian ingredients. And the first thing you will notice is on the top right corner, there was no positive aura. So all these things, be that fish, meat, but even eggs, they only have a negative aura in meetings. And what was quite shocking to me is that some of them has, here when you take the meat, 194.6 meters that can be measured by these aura scanners in negative energy. Now let's have a look then, of course, at the vegetarian ingredients, sorry. So the vegetarian ingredients, they also have a type of negative type 1 and type 2 aura, but they also have, and you see that in the right column, a positive aura. Again, you see here cauliflower has a very positive aura, spinach, cucumber, carrot, and so on and so forth. So far, this is all backing pretty much up what the science of Dada Bhagwaqn says. Now let's have a look at our second special case we had, which is milk. So here is again a control pictures of glass filled with different substances. I hope you can see that it's not very sharp, but on the left side, you see a control picture of an empty glass, and it's just the aura surrounding the glass there. And you can really see that green basically shows a positive aura, red signifies negative aura, and yellow is like a higher spiritual principle. So the empty glass is pretty much balanced in negativity and positivity, I would say. Let's have a look at the middle picture, which is coffee. With coffee, you can already see there is dark blue, right? There is a red even around the corners, around the outside parts, which is distressing energy. You can also see that the positivity around it gets a little bit eliminated. And on the right, and this is why I showed you this, we have milk. And you see that milk has a very green kind of aura, even with white patches, which is another purity signifier. So the glass of milk has actually a very, very positive kind of aura that it shows with him. And it even clears up, as you can see in the white on top, it even clears up the surrounding space of it. Okay, now they also tested what happens with cooked dishes. And they took a restaurant. We just learned that Dada Bhagwaqn has claimed, right? Like I said, that foods in outside takeaway restaurants, we have to be careful with this. And here they checked the same restaurant with the same cook. And it's a mixed kind of restaurant, which has vegetarian, but also non-vegetarian kind of dishes. And what you can see is that that's not surprising that the meat and egg dishes, they have a negative aura and no positive aura. But what is also very surprising here is that even the one dish that is only just mixed vegetables also doesn't have any positive aura. It just has a negative aura, which is again to show that Dada Bhagwaqn might be very right with what he said, that the energy of the cooks, the energy of the environment just goes into the food that is prepared. And we have the counterexample as well here, because they also made a test in the head chef of the Spiritual Research Center in Ashram. He prepared a raw cauliflower, which has usually a positive aura of 4.34 meter in total. And after preparing it, amazingly, it has a positive aura of 17.3 meters. So you can really see that it even increased the positive aura from the raw cauliflower, which is again, that those intentions, the good energy, the purity of the place even creates a more pure food. And then lastly, they also made an analysis of how the chakras look like, the chakras reading before and after a participant eating fish. And I thought this was also quite interesting because on the left, you can see before the chakras are way more aligned, right? Usually they should be in the center line, but they're still sort of at least much more aligned than on the right picture. And you see what kind of imbalance that instantly created in the person. So to sum it up, and I presented here you the links. You can just Google that yourself or just write it down, spiritualresearchfoundation.org, or on Facebook, University of Spirituality. You can find the content. They have many beautiful presentations on other various topics where they did oral readings. But to sum it up, how to prepare a meal that has a positive aura, they say avoid meat, fish, and eggs. Mostly focus on plant-based meals. The chef should be spiritually pure. There should be no spiritual distress. It's good if we chant God's name, less ego there. And also the environment should be spiritually pure, and we should not mix utensils. So pretty much what Dada Bhagwaqn was teaching all along, which is beautiful for me. So I just felt like I wanted to add that to give you also a glimpse of another direction and what they say about this. One of the last things I want to touch upon with you today is dogmatism in food. Because I think this is such an important topic, I believe. And the reason for that is that I experienced myself a lot that food is a highly controversial topic. And people have very stern beliefs in what is right and what is not right, and what others are doing might be good or not good. And Dadaji always says, this is just intended for your understanding. It's not there for you to be followed dogmatically. Right? And there is no need for people to boast about being pure vegetarian or to criticize others who are not. And this is a good reminder for my past self, because for me, meat eaters would sometimes trigger me on my journey. But he says that's just merely our own prejudice. You should not have any problems with those whom such a diet is natural. And again, we learned that in certain environments, if we look back at the Inuit people or even the Maasai in Africa, there are also different indications as to what is a wholesome food. And Dada Bhagwaqn even said on the contrary, when a person is really forced to give up things one enjoys, then one will constantly think about them instead of really thinking about one's spiritual development. Right? And another thing is, I really like this sentence of, if a certain poison is taken within a certain limit, it can act to cure many diseases. But if it's taken beyond a specific portion, then it could prove fatal and may kill one. So one should really be careful not to ascribe any comment unilaterally for anything or anyone whatsoever. I think this is a very important part of it. And Dadaji said and expressed that again very beautifully, that we should aim for, I call it net positive. And he said that we should really conduct ourselves in a way that our benefits are greater than our losses. But we should always stop if our losses are greater than our gains. And I think this is a very simple thing that helps us not to be rigid and exceed our own limits in food habits. And it's also a beautiful, maybe even analogy for life and living, because I, for myself, know I always wanted the 100% positive. And apart from maybe Dadaji or the Gnani himself, it's hard to find that in this dual world. So it's much better to come from it from a place that the benefits should outweigh the losses, to have that net positive. And if we look back at what I just showed you, the slides on even the vegetarian food, then we could also see that even the vegetarian food that is predominantly positive, it still had also negative auras, right? So we live in that dual world, and our goal is just to balance it out and to make sure that the positive, the benefits outweigh our losses. Okay, now I want to just touch upon one last topic, and that is the disadvantages of having cold food. And Dadaji always said that so long as food is freshly cooked and is hot, then there is the fire element in it. And with passage of time, however, this fire element, it recedes when the food just cools down. Makes a lot of sense, right? And when it's heated again, the fire element can also get back into it. But, and this is the important thing, when the fire element recedes to a certain extent, and he said that is the case after 3 to 4 hours, and if we still consume it, then it puts a burden on our digestive power. And having food the next day would rather even damage our digestive system. And for me, this was powerful information because I often ate very cold food from the day earlier, or maybe even cooked some rice in the morning and ate it in the evening. So again, there is an emphasis on like cooking freshly and cooking even yourself. And the disadvantages are really that, yeah, when the fire element is gone, then it becomes not very helpful for our digestion. And the same goes for having cold water. That he says it's not good to drink cold water from the fridge all the time, right? It should be as cool as the room temperature, but not ice cold. And he also says that there is even a benefit of drinking boiled water, right? So if taken daily, cold water, cold food, it can adversely affect our digestive system if the fire element is receding for too long. And with this being said, I want to close my today's talk, and I want to give a lot of room now. We're still a bit early on time, which is great, because I like much more to open ourselves up for a conversation, a dialogue, a discussion with you. Because I believe food always creates a lot of questions in our mind, and is like a very controversial topic, like I said. So let's take the remaining, how much we have, 23 minutes maybe, for some nice discussion. And with that, feel free to just join in. Thank you so much.
Wonderful, Chris. Jai Sachidanand, thank you. My God, it was all covering and very elaborative. I now invite participants to open up and share their comments, ask questions. Let me begin with myself. Chris, I just have curiosity whether people keep fasting in Germany.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's also something that is referred to in the book, right? Fasting is also highly beneficial. Dadaji advised that in the kind of consideration of what to talk about, I skipped this. But fasting is something that is also done in Germany, but not to an extent, I would say, like it is advised in India.
Right. Fine,
Yeah.
fine.
But very beneficial.
Dr. Ichidayal, your reaction is awaited. From Haridwar, Dr. Ichidayal has joined. And
Hello.
oh,
Hello.
yes, you're audible, ma'am.
Okay. Namaskar, sir. Jai Sachidanand.
Namaskar, Jai Sachidanand.
Jai Sachidanand.
Oh my God, the sound is low actually, yeah? You please keep the mic close to your mouth, please.
Today's session on holistic food science was really very informative, and it is really very crucial in this contemporary era, because it has become really very crucial to make wise choices regarding food, because we are surrounded with variety of foods, variety of taste, variety of taste, food and eatables. So it has become really very crucial to make wise choices and to overcome our unnecessary cravings. Now, now sir talked about processed food. Yes, it is loaded with chemicals and antioxidants and many artificial things. So we are eating more artificial food rather than natural food. And I learned this food pyramid today. It was really very interesting to learn about food pyramid. And the most interesting thing I found was about the mutual benefit of evolution. That if we are consuming the plants, yeah, we are taking this vegetarian food. So what cereals we are consuming, then we are sharing our merits with that. So it means if we are doing the minimal violence by consuming plant-based diet, and we are investing our energy that we get from that diet in good deeds, then we are not evolving only ourselves, we are evolving that life also that we consumed. So it is adding merits to that life that we had consumed. It was really very interesting to learn. Thank you so much. I'm really obliged today.
Thank you, Dr. Chidayal. It's quite true that our meal should be free from pains and someone's fears. Very well. May I request Shaila Mulji ma'am to share something from your side? Welcome.
Jai Satchidanand to everybody. Jai Satchidanand. Chris, I just want to say I'm so grateful that you shared this presentation, and looking forward to actually going through the book with a fine-tooth comb. I did read the Gujarati version of the book that you've put into English with Lalabhai Saheb and also Mahatma Nilesh from Germany. And you know, one of the things I really loved about your presentation is that you did go as far as to go into what science is saying about a lot of what Dadaji has taught us, because it's so important to be able to extend that understanding to the general population in the world. Those who have had the privilege of meeting Dadaji and, you know, getting the vision from him, we're very fortunate, and we don't question a lot of what was said to us because of what we've been given through grace. However, everyone else on the planet doesn't have that advantage either. So thank you so much. It was a beautiful presentation, much with lots of gratitude, and Jai Satchidanand to everybody.
Thank you, Shaila ma'am. And we got a message from Rani. Here it is. Wow, this presentation was incredible, and I learned so much, including getting clarity about milk consumption and avoiding eating outside. Loved how it was clearly presented with data and personal experience. I am surrounded by children and unable to come off mute. Yes, I look forward to reading the book, Jai Satchidanand. Well, ma'am, the book is available on Amazon.com, and we will also try to share the soft copy. Thank you very much. We have Lala sir with us, and I invite him for concluding remarks and to add if anything is left. Lala sir, over to you.
So nice, Chris, and everybody. I'm very happy to listen all through this session, and very good that you have added the findings of this Maharishi Spiritual University also. They are really interesting, because sometimes people need this kind of proofs and corroborative evidences. So nice, Chris, you have devoted a lot of time in preparing all these things, and all laurels and appreciation for this. Right? It's a very wonderful and very useful topic, as you say. We have tried to, so we'll put this on website also, HSRC website, and circulate it to our WhatsApp groups so that more and more people can take benefit of this science and are interested to read the full book about this science. So thank you very much, and thank you everyone for their comments and joining the session. Right?
Thank you, Lala sir.
Yeah.
Well, I'm reminded after this presentation, Dada Bhagwan's one statement. He used to say, German people are the best to understand my holistic science. And Chris Mueller, you really are the live example for this statement. You really understood it and you presented so well. I salute this awakening. If
And
I'm not
Chandrakant,
yes, sir.
Chandrakant, I would like to add one thing. You see, one point I forgot to include in the book, all of us, this is a fuel, no? Because food is a fuel.
Yeah.
Now that has a very elaborate implications. You see, there is a
network issue. Well, sir, your audio and video stopped suddenly. Please.
Want to take your say that.
All right. All right. So, among participants, is there any question? We have Kamlesh sir, Mrs. Prajakta Barar, Julia, Yashodhara ma'am, Gati Krishna ji. All right. So actually this was composite and perfect presentation. So there is no scope for any doubt to raise. So let us conclude this session, and I express my very sincere gratitude to our today's speaker, Mr. Chris Mueller. And I'm very thankful to technology that we are never going to miss this. This presentation will keep guiding all the future seekers. Thank you very much, Chris. Have a very good time. Jai Sachidanand, and participants, thank you very much for joining. Jai Sachidanand. Take very good care of yourself.
Jai Sachidanand. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.